Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Miranda and I am the Enchantress of Avalon, and I will be leading you on a journey into the lands mystical and into Avalon. So today's video is going to be about one of my favorite fairies to think about for this time of year as we're going into Samhain, and that is the Banshee. Side note, I do want to say, currently my upstairs neighbors are rudely playing very, very loud music. I don't know if it's picking up or not on here, but if you hear thumping and vibrating, that's the music upstairs. I do want to apologize, but it is what I'm working with today. Sometimes neighbors suck. Anyway, so what is a banshee? A banshee is a wailing woman. And we often hear talk about the cry of the banshee or the scream of the banshee, screaming like a banshee. And banshees have been used in a lot of different media over the years. There was one of my favorite episodes of Charmed, which is my favorite television show of all time, involved Phoebe getting turned into a banshee. And in that version, they were a demonic screamer. They're actually fairy women, but that version took a demonic twist on it and made them evil. They're not actually evil, though. And then, famously, Teen Wolf, the TV show, had, instead of having a witch character or a psychic character, they had a banshee who had these cool psychic abilities, and she could actually weaponize her screams, and she is the best character on that show, in my opinion, and that is Lydia. She's awesome. So banshees and screaming, those are the things that are always true of them throughout everything. They either wail or they scream. And I'm going to just go over a few of the connections with banshees. So banshees are fairy women who are like all fairies. Fairies are very much in a class structure, and there's always some sort of fairy queen. And they're connected to several fairy queens. The Morgan is said to be the queen of the banshees, but so is Cleodina, and so is Morgan Le Fay, can be connected to banshees. Less or so, mostly the Morgan Le Fay Morgan connection that is sometimes very, very controversial, which I've talked about before. But the banshee, that is also connected to the washer at the ford, who is the washerwoman that would wash the battle garments of warriors before battles, and if they saw their garments getting washed, they knew they wouldn't survive the battle. Instead of crying or wailing at this screaming at death to warn of death, it's a visual warning of death instead of an auditory one. And then, of course, I've mentioned this when I've talked about Melusine. Banshees are connected to her in that she took on banshee-like attributes when she was crying for the upcoming deaths of people who are in her bloodline, which she did famously do. Now, why are banshees connected to fairy queens, and why are fairy queens sometimes thought of as banshees? Like the Morgan is thought of as a banshee. She did, these battle cries and the screaming crow. We think of the battle, crow, the scald crow. Well, banshees are connected to these figures because they're powerful. Banshees are warning about the thing that most people fear more than anything: death. Who doesn't fear death in some way, shape, or form? Or is fascinated by death? I'm totally fascinated by death. I have an entire series that are just Gothic romance videos on this channel. I write extensively on my blog about all things morbid and macabre, and this is both a Morbid Monday and a fairy video because it's death. And as we're getting closer and closer to the best holiday of all time, Halloween, we are getting more attracted to these creepier things in life. Although I'm always attracted to this stuff, I am utterly fascinated by horror and legends and and gothic romance. It's so fun. So that's why I decided Banshees. Now, as I said, there are a lot of people who automatically assume Banshees are this very evil and morbid and murderous, I think is probably the best thing. That it's Banshees are causing death. No, they aren't. They are warning of death, and they are predicting death, and they are detecting it. But they aren't causing the death. The death is being caused by war or by illness. Banshees were often connected to a specific family, so every family in Ireland was said to have had a banshee. Like the old families had banshees, and the banshee connected to that family would wail, cry, scream when someone was about to die. So they were warning you. It was, hey, this tragic thing is going to happen. I don't want you to be surprised by it, so I'm going to warn you about it. And that's the true nature of the banshee, is warning, and it's almost a nurturing thing. And that's what Melusine would do for her own family, her own descendants, was, I don't want you to be caught off guard that this person is going to die. Maybe they've been sick a long time. Maybe they're going out into a battle. I'm going to warn you ahead of time so you don't have to be so frightened, or the pain will be maybe lessened. And interestingly, this banshee belief and this banshee lore would make its way into actual Irish customs having to do with their funeral customs. And that was to have wailers at funerals, which were women who were there to scream and wail and cry in this very haunting, it's almost a song really, where they would make these motions and these sounds in order to mourn the loss of this person. And often it would be like you would hire a wailer for your funeral, and it would just be part of the culture. I mean, nowadays when we think of like an Irish funeral, we think of, toasting with drinks and celebrating the life of the person. And that is a real Irish custom as well. But wailers were part of Irish funeral customs, and it was, let's cry and let's really get our emotions out at the fact that this person is dead. Let's honor them in this way. So that is where the folklore and the mythos of the Celtic world with the banshee was brought into the real world and the real customs of the Irish people. And of course, fairies were very much believed in and very much feared and loved for many generations. I mean, I've talked about this before. Fairy lore and fairy belief in the Celtic fairy faith was a big thing up all the way through the early 1900s. And we have great, really intelligent people who truly believed in fairies. I mean, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who invented Sherlock Holmes, the most logical character ever, was a believer in spiritualism and the occult, and a believer in fairies. When he heard about the Cottingley fairy story, he gravitated towards it. He met the girls and he said, I believe this is true. And he really publicized the story. He wrote a book about it. And we know the Cottingley story was a hoax. And we also know that his famous friendship with the great illusionist Harry Houdini, in fact, ended because Harry Houdini was debunking spiritualist practices, because these spiritualists were using the same techniques he was in his illusions to trick people. And he was like, well, no, this is fake. And that actually severed their friendship because of this belief. So it's not this thing that's really, really deep in the past and you have to go into the mists of the past to look at, because fairies and fairy women like banshees, they were believed in really, really recently, and there are still many people who believe in them today. And so I think I've said most of what I wanted to say about banshees. I do want to recommend a couple books. A book, really. This is Celtic Lore and Spellcraft of the Dark Goddess by Stephanie Woodfield, and I believe I've mentioned this book before. It is a great book on the Morrigan, and it goes through all her different aspects, including Mistress of Magic and Fairy Queen aspect. So you could get a little bit of deepening into Banshee lore there. If you just want to learn about other dark fairies, I recommend as a primer the Fairy Bible by Teresa Mori. Again, primer. It's beautifully illustrated. That's one of the great things about that. That's like the Earth Fairy section, and there are sections on all different types of fae in this. I don't remember if Banshees actually have their own section in here, but you certainly will get a feel for other types. The Lana and She, another favorite of mine, do have a section in this book, and it's fun. It's a good primer for just beginning scholars of fairy lore. It's great to have on the shelf too. It's fun. So I want to thank you all for joining me on this macabre Monday, this morbid Monday. This Monday, which is the last Monday of September, as we're going into the spookiest of months, October. So thank you so much for joining me. And if you've liked what I've said, if you've liked this video, please like, comment, subscribe, and pop over to my blog, whiteroseofavalon.life, for more content. I'll also link some blog posts that relate to the stuff I've talked about in the description box below. I did a really great post about dark fairies to celebrate around Samhain last year around Samhain, so check it out. And again, thank you, and I am very sorry if you could hear that music upstairs.